if you want to talk about people that just aren't fazed by the snow, it's people in Minnesota. They just, whatever it is. I mean, they don't cancel school. They just put chains on their tires. They get to work. But one thing that has them outraged is the unfolding scandal that's taken place over the last 4+ years when it comes to Medicaid, their social programs. Federal dollars seem to be going in the pockets of fraudsters and crooks, and in some cases, leaving the country. James Comer and his oversight committee is doing investigating. The Treasury Secretary is beginning to track the money, and you have a governor scrambling to explain himself, looking for any excuse to point the fingers elsewhere.
Yeah, that's right, Brian. And what's notable about this week is that we were originally told that this massive Minnesota fraud scandal was to the tune of $1 billion, and that's a shocking figure. But now federal authorities are saying that could be just the tip of the iceberg, and this could have ballooned
$9 billion, guys.
To $9 billion in stolen
of tax
taxpayer
dollars.
money.
Okay.
So a group of just about 100 mayors across the state of Minnesota wrote Governor Walz a letter just railing against what's taking place. And part of that letter says fraud, unchecked spending, and inconsistent fiscal management in St. Paul have trickled down to our cities, reducing our capacity to plan responsibly, maintain infrastructure, hire and retain employees, and sustain core services without overburdening local taxpayers.
That's right. And Brian, you spoke with two of the mayors that penned that letter. And here's what,
guys, for a second here. Like, this is why, I mean, obviously, if you want to run for president, do it, absolutely, but make sure your like ducks are in order, if that makes any sense here, because you end up getting into a scenario where when you lose, okay, everyone starts targeting you specifically and everything else is around you. Not saying that Tim Walz is he's valuable. Let's just say this here. Tampon Tim is an interesting man here, guys. Okay, understand that here. But of course, now everyone is going to be looking at anything that you have that you're involved with. Listen, bro, if Kamala was doing anything meaningful right now, trust me and believe this here, that would be all over the news right now.
what they had to say.
I have championed and spearheaded this letter, and we have over 100 mayors now that are on this letter. Within the last 3 months, this has really gone downhill. And Brian, if we do the quick math, $9 billion in fraud divided by 5.79 million Minnesotans comes out to roughly be $1,500 a person that each Minnesotan, each hardworking Minnesotan has had stolen from them from the Walz administration and the policies coming out of St. Paul.
I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm a Minnesotan, and I'm frustrated with how it had happened.
I like that. Be that
communication that's happened. So
welcome.
Our mayors are joining together not to point fingers and blame, but we're here to help solve the problem. That's what we do. We don't get to pass the buck off to somebody else. And when fraud or anything bad happens in our community, people lose their jobs.
Yeah, guys, what's interesting about this guy here is I've never seen this man's face at all. I have no idea who he is. But I do like the way he just kind of delivered this, because I think it's more meaningful than I think we all really think here. I don't generally side with people immediately when I realize that you have picked a side, if that makes any sense here, guys. So when you're kind of floating around in the middle where you're like, listen, bro, I'm not left, I'm not right. Specifically, I'm here to represent my state. I want the best to happen for my state. I don't really want anyone to be affecting my state in any meaningful manner. Let's just say this year. I like people like this here. Okay, seriously. It feels like they are not as echo chambered as many of the people in the political sphere currently are.
I understand being nice, but you have to blame. To get to the bottom of it, you got to find out who's responsible. You can't.
I mean,
blame,
obviously find the problem,
if there's a
right?
natural disaster, there's a volcano eruption. I don't want to point fingers. But if someone takes $9 billion, you better believe I'm going to point fingers.
Yeah, and the one of our
do that,
representatives
obviously.
talked about $1,500 in Minnesota taxpayer money that was stolen. But really, that number, it doesn't just impact Minnesota residents, because a lot of this was federal money coming into Minnesota. So this is everybody's taxpayer dollars that was stolen, which is why Congresswoman Marinette Miller-Meeks, she introduced the Walz Act yesterday, and that stands for Welfare Abuse and Laundering Zillions Act, which would require inspector generals to open investigations into any program that sees a 10% increase or greater in total payments within a 6-month period. And something like that really would solve the problem.
It would.
Because there were a lot of state organizations that were raising red flags and saying, how could we possibly be getting this many requests for more money into these programs? And what happened is these fraudulent programs were going well, if you raise any red flags or don't give us this money, we're going to accuse you of racism. And then the state agencies back down out of fear of being accused of racism, even though they were seeing these numbers and saying, this doesn't make sense.
Well, and let's not forget that much of the vehicle through which this fraud was able to be carried out was the bill called the Meals Act in 2020 that Representative Ilhan Omar of Somali descent put forth in Congress to just run this money out of the door. And then now you have the New York Post headline today talking about Minnesota's Somali social services scammers may have stolen this $9 billion, nearly Somalia's entire economy. The enormous new estimate is a nearly 9-fold increase from the swiped $1 billion previously suspected, according to federal prosecutors, as you pointed out, Carly. And, you know, Brian, you mentioned that the Treasury Secretary is now trying to track this money. We know the fraud, and there's a trail for the fraud that they're starting to really uncover that grows and grows and grows. But we don't know how much of that may have gone back home to Somalia to terrorist organizations. And that's going to be a piece of this.
How much of it is going back? Probably a good bit, guys. I mean, you have to understand how remittance works, right? Generally, when people are introduced to Western society, let's say from other places, they're like, hey, listen, you guys are making a lot of money, right? Compared to what we were making. So what ends up happening is that any bit of money, a solid percentage of the money that they're actually making in the United States of America, kind of by default goes back to whatever country that they previously ran from, that they still have family in, right? This is why remittance shows on countries, smaller countries, GDPs, the amount of money that the West is basically sending to these smaller nations, guys.
Who's right
Of course, they're sending money
Either
back.
She's the most naive congresswoman in the history of congresswomen, or she knows exactly what was going on the whole time. She said, well, I reported this to the Farm Bureau, or after a while, you had no interest in pushing this forward, and she has a lot of explaining to do. Instead, she says, well, I'm being targeted. No. The area in which we represent is where that was ripe with fraud, number one. And number two is they would threaten not only racism if you look to find out where the money was going. They would say, hey, look, you want to be a congressman? You want to be attorney general? You're not going to get any votes if you continue to probe in this area, because there's 80,000 there, and that will deliver a city and a constituency. And, you know, so people just backed off.
James Comer said that he does believe that Tim Walz knew about this, but was too afraid to say anything out of fear of offending the Somali community. What about offending taxpayers? All people whose money was stolen. And the only thing that Tim Walz has really said about this is, well, the Trump administration, the federal government is inflating these numbers. Okay, so what if it's $7 billion, $8 billion? Is that not horrific?
Yeah, I'm sorry, bro. Even if it was $100,000, I'd probably be here talking the same.
Where does it stop? $1 billion even.
Well, right. It's a great point. And James Comer also not only looking at Governor Walz, but also the Attorney General Keith Ellison to find out whether or not he may have known something, and whether he was aware, and if he wasn't aware, why wasn't he, and where are the charges. We'll find out where that goes.
Okay, guys, hold on. Like, kind of by default, I'm generally against the concept of lumping an entire group of people into one specific thing, right? I think even they just said, like, listen, there was some money that was basically being sent illicitly to, for the most part, fund al-Shabaab. That's basically a fact here. We kind of know this is true here. But now, listen, guys, I get it. They are a gigantic voting bloc in a specific area in Minnesota. I get it. You don't want to offend them, because if you do that, then immediately they will no longer vote for your causes. But there has to be a time where we can kind of get away from the idea, at least, of trying to stand up for something that generally is kind of nothing, specifically if it's rooted in terribleness. Okay, listen, if people are doing bad things, okay, do not just ignore it for the sole purpose of your votes. That's a little bit ridiculous, my opinion here, right? But again, I'm not a politician, right? So I don't know if that's like a normal thing, but it feels like it may actually be a normal thing. Just like looking at politics for the last, let's say, 2 decades, and when certain groups are important and when they're not, I can tell right now this is a little bit weird, guys. You don't want to offend people because you want them to consistently come to the polls for you. Okay.
Guys, do you want to watch movies with me? I never actually thought to like promote it over here, guys. But if you guys do want to watch it, guys, we have hundreds of movies, and I mean hundreds of movies that we've reacted to. You guys can come watch them with me if you want to, along with many TV shows. Currently, we're working on the show Dexter, along with Vikings. And we have a lot of series that are already completed. But if you guys do want to watch it with me, the link is in the description. Everything's available at the second tier. But of course, if that's not your thing, guys, don't worry, right? Listen, like and subscribe.